Well, guys, after almost 5 years, over 230 episodes, we've had some really good conversations on this show. And so this year, to celebrate Christmas, to give you a gift, we're going back into the archives and capturing some of your favorites and some of mine and re-releasing them throughout the month. This is some of the best we have to offer on this show. And so we're honored and excited to share them with you again on replay this Christmas. We'll be back again at the beginning of the year with more conversations, new guests, new topics, and some more fun. But for now, here are some of your favorites and mine. Merry Christmas and enjoy. Hey guys, I'm Mark.
I'm Alon.
And welcome to another episode of The Next Man Up. Well, welcome dads to the Next Man Up podcast, where we are helping fathers guide their sons into manhood, because when boys become healthy and godly men, everyone benefits. Okay, so today, do we have a treat for you? Our guest is Craig Fullen. He's a dad, he's a husband, he's an attorney, he's a performance coach, and what we're going to be talking about today, probably most of all, is he's a champion of this idea called the joyful mindset. Now, I've known Craig for a little while. I get to know him a little bit better on the show today, and I'm excited to share his story with you, the things that he's gone through, the way he's worked to overcome them, the passion in his life to help people become the best version of themselves, and to really unpack what this idea of joyful mindset is. So Craig is joining us today, excited to share him with you. So without any further ado, let's get right to it. Craig Fullen. Craig, it's so great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on and being a part of the Next Man Up podcast today, man.
Hey guys, honored to be here.
So you and I know each other, and you're just kind of getting to know Alon a little bit today. But
I like him already, though.
I'm not surprised. He's that kind of guy. But I want to give our listeners an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So just tell us a little bit about your story and who you are, and how you kind of got to be the man that you are today.
Wow, that's a loaded question. So, I was talking with you guys a little bit. I don't want to talk that much about my background in terms of, my history and where I grew up. But, I had kind of a pretty good childhood, grew up partly in Ohio, eventually moved to New Jersey, graduated high school there. And, one of the things that I encountered growing up was some of my sports experiences, which we'll kind of get into later because they'll relate to coaching. So I loved baseball. That was my favorite sport growing up, and eventually stopped playing after my freshman year in high school, continued to play some other sports, tennis and golf. But that's, like I said, that's relevant for later. Then went on to, college, law school, did that whole thing, and then, met my wife at a law firm that I worked in Columbus, and now have two kids, a son who's in high school and a daughter who's in middle school. And, so that's kind of a little bit, me and just my general background. But as you know, like I've kind of gotten into really trying to figure out like what is my purpose in life? And that's been a lot of my focus recently. And that's led me to a lot of development in mindset and mental performance. And so that's some of the things that I'm focusing on now.
Okay.
So I always like to ask new guests on the show about their journey to becoming a man. You've listened to us for a little bit. You know what we're all about. It is about raising up the next generation of men. Tell me a little bit about what your journey was like, and what your relationship with your father was like, and maybe the influence that he had on your life in becoming the man that you are today.
Sure. And, when you guys talk about becoming a man, and that's such a hard concept sometimes to think about. And when I think about that too, I realize that there was only one perfect man who ever walked the earth.
Yeah.
And that was Jesus. And so, I'm always aspiring to kind of meet up to live up to those standards, but I know I'll fall short. So, the journey to become a man, I guess, is maybe always ongoing, right? And you're always trying to get better and improve. So, in some respects, I don't know if I ever feel like I've finally, arrived, but I'm striving for that. My relationship with my dad growing up was pretty good. My dad was, I would say that the one thing that, and I thought about this a lot recently, that my dad, the thing I learned most about from my dad was just he modeled the behavior and modeled the values and standards that I've incorporated into my own life. And it wasn't so much that there was, a lot of formal discussions about being a man or doing the right things or, responsibilities or things like that. It was more just that I observed, how he treated people, how he treated my mom, the things he did, when I wanted to throw the baseball and he was always willing to do it. He might have had a hard day at work, but he was willing to come home and spend the time doing that. And I think there were times maybe, and even now, like sometimes I think he wants to have some conversations about things that, and it may sometimes not always be, it may feel a little bit awkward at times or whatever. But what I've noticed though is that's kind of the same situation I've got with my son, I think now, is that, I'd love to be able to tell him more things and tell him about, the type of man I want him to be and things like that. But I've realized that how important it is just to model the behavior.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing that he's picking up on those things now. And, whether it's things like the fact that my dad, yes, he would have an occasional drink, but never would drink to excess. I never saw him have more than one drink, right? It's just maybe a beer, after like dinner or something like that. And that was it. Like I never saw anything.
He didn't abuse it.
He did not abuse it at all. And I've noticed that I kind of have the same philosophy. I've really not, alcohol's not a focus of my life. And my son's recognized that because he's seen other people where it is a focus. And he just like, well, you never drink, and that's not, I'm saying may have an occasional beer or something like that, but it is not a focus at all in my life. And I know that he recognizes that now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was there a point in your journey where you felt like I've crossed the threshold from boy to man?
The only thing I would say about that, gosh, it almost feels like that's more recent, to be perfectly honest. And because as I was thinking about the idea of manhood and then also the success, which was, you guys talked about that in your last podcast. And, I think in order to be a man and really be the essence of manhood, you need to be focusing on trying to be the best version of yourself and what God is calling you to be. And I don't know that I have really consciously focused on that until the last few years. Not that I wasn't a good person or that I wasn't responsible or, living with at least some sets of ethics and values, but I really wasn't aware and conscientious of, trying to be the best version of me and fulfill my potential and fulfill the purpose that God has for me.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Would you say it was like autopilot? Like
absolutely. I love that word, Alon.
Yeah.
I love that word.
Okay.
And because I think so many people are on autopilot, right? I mean, I always talk about this, that, so many people, they just think about, I'm going to go home and watch Netflix, and they're not really thinking. They get up, they do the same thing every day. They're not really thinking about, what's my purpose? What's my calling? How can I get better? How, where, am I fulfilling my potential and all that I'm here to be?
Yeah.
What was the catalyst? So I have a theory or an idea, but I'm curious for you, like, since it was so recent, what do you think the catalyst was?
I think there were a few different things. One was I was kind of at a point with my career where I had some challenges going on with that, where it was a little bit of a wake-up call for that. I knew I needed to make some changes there. That was one thing. The second thing was some challenges we had with my son, and just some things he was going through emotionally and where he was in his development. And as well as the fact that some of my involvement with the financial markets that I mentioned, I trade the financial markets, and I realized, gosh, in order to do all these things, I need to be better. I need to be better. And like, how do I get to be a better person overall? And I realized that being disciplined and is a way of life. It's not just one aspect of your life. And so I was trying to be disciplined in my things that I was doing in the financial markets, but realized I needed to be disciplined in all areas of my life. And that includes like the physical fitness and includes, finances, whatever it is. And so that just became a way of life in my thinking. And that kind of led to the mental performance concept and the mindset focus that we've talked about before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that aligned at all with your theory, or?
Well, I was going to go something simpler like midlife crisis.
Well, maybe that was part of it, right? It was like, but it's all those things that kind of came out there.
But I do think I've run into a number of men in my travels, including myself. I kind of fit that profile. You get into 20, 25, 30 years into your professional life, your adult life, and you start to see things different. And maybe you start to see the end a little more clearly than you can see the beginning. And I think it's at that point, it opens you up to other ideas, other opportunities, other beliefs, maybe not like core beliefs, but maybe a way to focus in on things that you didn't want to focus in or didn't focus in on before. I'm mumbling my way through this. Let me say it differently. I feel like you start to think about finishing well and what does that look like and how do I finish well? How do I contribute? How do I make a difference with the time that I've got left? And instead of a blonde or a red sports car or, a cruise around Europe for a month.
Yeah. Or a six pack.
Or not like in your abs, but more like in your right? A different
Either
kind
one,
of six
choose.
pack. You, in your case, in an inspiring way, went deep inside and said, "Who am I? What am I about? And what is the impact that I want to make while I still have time on this earth?" And that's fantastic.
There was a phrase you said, "better version of yourself," and my first thought was like, "Oh, he thought he sucked," but I can see I can see a lot of us guys getting to that space of saying, "Oh, life just sucks. I'm just a sucky person. I'm not good at anything. I'm not." The more I thought about it, I was like, I don't think that's what you were saying. I think you were saying it's almost like shining off a diamond that hasn't been polished in a while.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's cleaning a mirror. It's like there's more to you there, but because we said autopilot, we just doing things just out of normal reflex of life. The true you hasn't really come out yet.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this idea or this thought of, wait, there's got to be more. There's got to be more to me. There's got to be better of me. And you just decided to polish it out and let it out.
Absolutely. And, just a kind of perspective on that, Alon, is that, here I am in my early 50s, and I feel like I'm just getting started, right?
Yeah.
And most people be like, thinking about retirement and stuff. And I'm like my best stuff's ahead of me, right?
Yeah.
And it took me, like I said, that's something where I think is maybe a different mindset to begin with. And one thing that maybe there's a lot of ways I can go on this and probably have a lot of things to talk about here, but I will bring this up because two people have said this and it really hit me. So there's a guy named Ed Milet who runs a podcast, as well as there's a guy named David Goggins who's a Navy SEAL and a ultra marathon runner. And both these guys have said a similar concept, which is the only thing they fear is they will get to the end of their life and they will meet God and he will show them the person that they were supposed to be. And it was so far away from who they actually were. And so they're chasing that kind of best version of themselves.
Yeah.
And they're hoping that God shows them, like, you became the person you were intended to be.
That's cool. That's cool.
John Eldredge has a lot to say in the space of men making and initiation and going from boyhood to manhood. But one of the things that he says that I really like is once you enter into the manhood space, the initiation doesn't stop. God the Father is continuing to initiate us deeper and deeper and deeper into what it means to be man, what it means to be human, what it means to be Craig, and the person that he has created Craig to be. And so that just aligns exactly with the journey
Absolutely.
that you're on.
Absolutely.
So let's transition a little bit into this space that you're in now. As you're thinking about mindset, you're thinking about performance, and tell us when you really became interested in this. You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but like that moment where you're like, this is where I want to go. I want to just lean into mindset and performance and that type of thing.
So sure. And let me give you a little bit of backstory here, because I think that as I was on my journey of personal and self-development, I'm listening to different podcasts, I'm reading different books, and a few things happened that I think really kind of stood out for me. One was, I learned a little bit about Stoicism and the philosophy of Stoicism, and, Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. And the biggest concept I took away from there is control the things you can control and let go of the rest. I mean, that's maybe the biggest thing that I took away from that. I also read Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl.
Oh, yeah.
And what that really taught me was that you can, people get in this idea that everything happens for a purpose or a reason. And, I don't know how I feel about that, but you can find meaning in everything.
Yes.
And that's the message of that book.
Yep. Especially suffering like in a Holocaust camp like Frankel went through.
Correct. And what I also found I also kind of equated some of the things from that book with some of the things that the Apostle Paul went through too. And you kind of take those writings about like all the meaning, and then also the idea of still having joy in suffering, right? And joy, be joyful always, give thanks in all circumstances, right? That kind of concept that Paul was conveying too really stood out to me. And, what kind of tied it together a lot for me was seeing Tyler Trent, that Purdue student who was the honorary captain of the football team back in 2018. As one of my good friends who played football for Ohio State likes to say, that kid, single-handedly caused Ohio State not to be eligible for the national championship that year.
Ouch.
But if you recall, Tyler Trent, he's suffering from cancer, and you knew that it was terminal, but you saw the joy on that kid's face. And that really stood out to me. I'm like, if that kid can have joy and purpose and meaning in his life, given what he's going through, what does that say about me? And he would always quote 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18, which is that, be joyful always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for that is God's will for you in Jesus Christ. And that was such a powerful statement. I'd never really focused on that scripture. That was the origins of kind of this joyful mindset, that concept that I came up with, which is, at the end of the day, we can have joy always. And that the difference between joy and happiness is like, happiness is depending on things happening, right? And I've heard that kind of I love that expression. And joy is like, you can just have that in an internal joy. But I really feel that, to really have that internal joy at the ultimate level, you have to have that relationship with Christ. I mean, that's where it's going to really, you're going to find that peace in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Say that phrase again. Happiness is what?
Happiness depends on things happening, right? And I think so many people like, I'll be happy when, and they're looking for things to bring them happiness.
The external or the circumstances.
The external, absolutely.
Yeah.
Instead of just let's find joy, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. It takes me back a little bit into my journey, my spiritual journey. I wrote an article for a friend's blog this past week about the theme that he was doing was about how we experienced God or how we understood God in our 20s, which was a number of years ago for me now. But it took me back in my journey at how I equated God's favor and God's blessing in my life with the circumstances. Did I have the good wife, the good job, the good car, the good house, the good 401k, right? Like, was I healthy? I at the time, and I can see it now, but at the time I couldn't, but I had really associated God's favor and blessing with how the circumstances were going in my life. And guess what happens when you hit a rough patch?
Oh, dude.
That's bad theology. Because you start to think, well, God must not love me, so I need to work harder, I need to do more, or I'm just a lowlife. God never loved me to begin with, right?
Yeah,
like it's just anyway. Hearing you talk takes me back there in my own journey and overcoming that, trying to replace happiness with that deep-seated joy that is unshakable and unmoving, because it's based on something more than just circumstance.
Sure.
Yeah, and I love that how you gave your story on that, because I think that so many people really think, well, I'm doing the right things and I should have these things should be happening to me, but they're not, or whatever. And for me, it's kind of like been this acceptance that I don't know what my journey entails, right? Like, I don't know what God has planned for me, and some things I might not have chosen, but if I believe that they're part of my purpose, then I can deal with them. And an example of this I always think about is Bethany Hamilton, the surfer. If you ever saw the movie Soul Surfer,
yeah.
And there was that. And if you saw the movie, in the movie, there was that point in time where they asked her, did she kind of regret or wish she hadn't gone in the water that day that she got her arm bit off? And she said, well, it's basically, I wouldn't have this opportunity to reach all these people that I do now if this hadn't happened, right? And so I think that having this idea of acceptance is important, and not an idea of entitlement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And not just a resignation that there's nothing I can do, woe is me, I just have to accept it and move on. Not victim thinking,
Correct.
right? That's not at all what you're talking about. You're talking about accepting the things that you can't control.
There we go, back to that stoicism concept, right?
Influencing the things you can and moving forward.
It's a very process versus outcome kind of approach, right? Like, here's the things that I think I need to do or I can control, and I'm going to do those, but I don't know how things are going to turn out.
Yeah.
And being okay with that.
Yeah. And, there's part of me that goes, well, there's a lot of messiness that comes along with that.
There's messiness that comes. Thought I can tell right now.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking like, well, because as we're saying, I just want to make sure listeners who are listening, we're not saying that like the stuff of life that is just really hard and tough that hits you. You don't just like jump back up to your feet and go, all right, that happened. I accept that. Now let's go conquer the world. That's not it.
Yeah, like this peppy fake optimism or whatever.
But is it? There is a sense of there has to be like there has to be something in you that you have to feed and mature and sharpen and whatever develop, that goes when something crazy goes on in my life, that I know it's hard and I know it's tough, and I'm going to deal with that toughness. I'm going to deal with all those hard things. But at the same time, I know that this does not have to define me.
Absolutely.
This doesn't have to define my life. And I am more than what is happening to me. And so, in that kind of headspace, let's conquer, let's move. And such, and live basically. And so I was thinking about this. I'm playing this out throughout my head, and I'm like, I bet you there's some listeners that are just like, oh, you guys sound fake. No, we're not sounding fake.
No.
This is just the reality of life, and we can own it.
Well, and if I can piggyback on that, Alon, give you an example. We haven't talked about this yet. Is that my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer a year ago, and a little over a year ago, and it was. And fortunately, I kind of developed this mindset approach and was really ready for it, to be honest. When I almost had, I did have a premonition that I was getting ready to be hit with something.
Okay.
And so when that came, I was like, okay,
This is it.
game on. And I'll also tell you, just as a little bit of a side note here, I had read about, gosh, and I can't think of his name. There was I believe he was a Navy pilot who was shot down in the Vietnam War, and who kind of had this stoicism mindset. And he had already pre-planned, like, if I get shot down, here's what's going to happen. And then when he got shot down, it was like, okay, we're going into this mode.
Wow.
So when my wife was diagnosed, I kind of just went into that mode. And, the reality is, you can either have people feel sorry for you, or you can try to inspire people by the way you're dealing with the situation. And it was interesting because we would have people come over to our house and they'd be like talking really quiet and, are you guys okay? And whatever. And I'm like, guys, come on, let's, and I didn't really want to focus on what was going on. I didn't really want to focus on the illness. Let's focus on other things. I mean, we're still alive. We've got still stuff to do. And you don't want to give energy to what these other things that you can't control.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we were going through the treatments or doing all these things. Let's just do all these things and we're going to live our lives. And I think it was really good for our kids to see that, that, we're not just kind of stopping our lives. Right.
Talk about modeling.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I'm wondering what they've caught by watching you walk this out and your wife walk this out.
Well, I will tell you that my son, we have seen a lot more resilience in him in the past year.
Okay.
And he went through a lot of things while we were going through this as well. And he's in a different place now, which is kind of good to see. And maybe some of that was caught from that.
So Craig, guys, you know this. Guys have a tendency to just keep it all inside and not show any emotion. And I can imagine that when someone hears stoicism, they're thinking, right? Like, I just got to gut it through. I got to put the smile on. I gotta be joyful. And I know that's not what you mean, but help us walk through the balance of being emotionally vulnerable to what's really going on and yet resilient,
right,
such that you're able to choose to be joyful in that difficult situation.
This is a great question. I got this actually from a friend last week, and I tend to be a little bit more of this standards over feelings concept, which we've talked about. And my idea is that my feelings are generated from thoughts. And if I can control my thoughts, then I can control my feelings, and I don't have to go to dark places, right? Mm-hmm. And science, I guess, apparently proves that you can only have one thought in your mind at a time. So why not have something that is empowering and positive and keep focusing on that? So I know that seems a little bit on that kind of extreme side, and that's kind of maybe that David Goggins personality of just you drive through everything, and some people maybe it doesn't resonate with them. But I think the biggest thing is to become aware of your feelings. And at least if you are having feelings, become aware of them, where they're originating from. And then if you really, like I just said, I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to have feelings of despair. And so I changed my thoughts. I changed my physiology. I mean, one of the greatest ways to kind of change is do things physical. It got me more into fitness and just whatever I needed to do to change that mentality. But I think, a lot of it is first becoming aware. Am I getting, what feelings am I having? What behaviors are they causing? Right? Because feelings cause behaviors, right. And that's what people don't. They sometimes lose sight of that. That the way you're reacting is because of a feeling you're having.
That's right.
And if you can start to understand that, then maybe you can at least deal with it. So there's kind of the hardline approach that I talked about, but I think there's the awareness approach, and then understanding the connections with the behaviors, and then the behaviors and how they're being impacted by your feelings. And, that's kind of your starting point, right? And then, but realize though that everything you're focusing on, you're giving energy to. Like, and I heard a concept the other day, like, you can either dwell with your feelings or dwell with God. So I'm going to choose to dwell with God and focus on things that are more positive.
Yeah. So let me just be clear, because
Okay.
I know what you're saying, but what I'm not hearing you say is ignore your feelings, just gut it out, get past it, drive them down deep, and plow through. That's not at all what you're saying. What I hear you saying is that I am aware of how I'm feeling, and I know those feelings are coming from a thought. So if I can go further upstream, identify the thought, change the thought, then I can influence how I'm feeling. It goes from awareness to action pretty quick for you, rather than I'm just going to ignore my feelings altogether and pretend they don't exist.
Yeah, and I think that part of that, what you said, it's a practice, right?
Yes.
And I think and so for me, it's happening very quickly now. So that I'm, yes, I might have some negative feelings, but I'm not going to stay there very long. And I also know, like, what can I do to get out of that feeling pretty quickly, or what thought can I replace to get out of that, right?
Yeah.
So it's not really, like you said, it's probably not gutting through. In a way, maybe it feels like I'm kind of gutting through it now because the process for me is much more rapid, but it's that becoming aware and then figuring out what feeling and what thought do I want to have, right?
When I first became aware of emotional intelligence, EQ, whatever, the point for me at which it all began to click is when you see your feelings, your emotions as information.
Correct.
And data points that you can pay attention to instead of just ignore them because men aren't supposed to feel other than anger, right? Like that's kind of the cultural message. Only anger is okay, but even that in small doses. If you can acknowledge your emotions and recognize that they're signals that are trying to tell you something, then you have options to deal with them. Yeah. And one of those options is to continue to find the root cause of those feelings and change it.
Absolutely.
And deal with it.
Absolutely.
Like why are you're getting angry because someone bumped into you. Why does that bother you so much?
You're right, Alon.
Like, what is the root of that?
Yes.
Okay, let's deal with that. But also, see, I love it's like a two-prong approach because there's mercy for you. And mercy in going, no, there's a reason why you're doing this. Let's alleviate some of that. So let's change your thought. Let's change your reaction. Let's get you doing something different when you're angry. Or I work with students who, when they get happy, oh my goodness, it's like the Energizer Bunny on 1,000 and they're bouncing off the room and they want everybody to join in on their happiness, and then all of a sudden they just crash.
Right.
The bubble bursts.
And so it's like, like getting, like whether you're angry, happy, sad, whatever emotion you're feeling, like let's like help you change a thought and a reaction, but then also deal with the root cause of it, which is what? Is it some hidden trauma that you've experienced? Is it whatever? Let's deal with that. Let's give justice for that and give mercy for the front end as well, which meets in the middle, and you become a better version of yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that's good. That's good. And I think it's kind of combining some of the things you guys said. Understanding that your feelings are not your identity.
No.
That's, separating yourself from these feelings. I'm having this feeling which generated from some thought, but that's not necessarily me or the person that I want to be, right?
That's right.
And that's, I think, a critical thing to keep in mind. And the other thing I would add, kind of piggybacking again on Alon here, is that I found myself a little bit more even keel now. Like I don't have the highs and the lows, because it's just that understanding of what life is, and this kind of like expecting anything can happen, and realizing that not everything that, I think so many people are caught up in a single event being like, oh, this is great, and this is, everything that's supposed to be happening for me. And that may not be the case. That may lead to another path, which is really not where they hope to go, And so I think this idea that you can be much more accepting of the journey and just realize, okay, I'm kind of rolling with this right now.
Yeah. It's the Mr. Miyagi moment. It's the Yoda moment. It's like, we look at these, think about some of these characters, right? We think like, wow, they're so even keeled. There's like nothing bothers them. It's the unbothered life, and it's like it seems far away, but I think it's actually more attainable than we think.
Yeah.
And I think that's you're reaching that point, or you've reached that point.
Well, and one book that really influenced me on that was Chris Spielman wrote a book about Stephanie and her journey. I think it's called That's Why I'm Here. And, Chris, if you remember him as a football player, was such an intense, emotional football player. And somewhat, I think, in his personal life, he just was kind of still an intense person as well. And he kind of had highs and lows. And I sensed through the book, reading the book, that, Stephanie had like a 9-year journey through her cancer.
Yeah, man.
And I could sense the highs and lows that he went through. And it wasn't till almost the end that he really had more of that peace, that he and I think he just understood this is the journey that we're on, and he accepted that journey, and this was God's plan, right? And that this is it, that he wouldn't get as high and low depending on what prognosis had just come out on her situation. And it took him a while to understand that. And I think that I was very influenced by reading that and seeing him going through that process and how he became much more even keel afterwards.
I think you even just nailed it, the word peace. He just had peace. And I think that's what we all want in our lives, right? We want peace. And how do we get that? How do we get to a place where we're peaceful inside? There's serenity within our minds and in our hearts and in our lives in general. And that's for many, we don't find it, but to know that there's a path that, you can find peace, and you can find like a space where it's not always storming and raining, at least in here. And I'm pointing to my heart and in my mind, how do I get that?
Yeah, I think that's why stories like Viktor Frankl and Bethany Hamilton and others are so powerful and so compelling, because when you look at them from the outside, you can choose to see all of the tragic things that have happened in their life. And then you listen to them talk, or you read what they've written, and they're like, no, I still found purpose. I still found meaning. I still found... I still had this deep, abiding joy in the midst of all of that suffering. And boy, it's like, really? If I believe that to be true for them, could it be true for me as well in the circumstances that I'm going through? And, the answer is yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Craig, take us up to where you are now going professionally, and some of the things that you want to do, and how this joyful mindset idea is influencing the direction that you're going and the difference that you want to make.
Sure. So I've worked with a few individuals now, kind of on an informal basis, with this whole joyful mindset concept. Some people who have gone through some difficult times, and really helping them change their mindset and to be able to find more joy and peace in their life. Knowing that that's ultimately what we want. We want joy and peace in our life, right? That's why we pursue things. In contrast, I think so many people are either on autopilot, like you said, Alon, or they're seeking comfort. Mm-hmm. And I think some people just want to be comfortable. But the challenge with that is, I think you're only going to find fulfillment in life if you're growing and you're contributing. Okay? And if you're not growing and contributing, you're going to find like, well, you're going to get depressed. You're going to struggle, and like, what's life about? Like, why am I here? And then you just kind of fall into these routines. And I think that's why a lot of people are struggling, is they're not growing and they're not contributing because they've pursued more of a comfort basis. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's something, that kind of sticks out for me. But one of the big things that I'm doing as I'm, focusing on coaching, and some of the things I'm starting to work on now focus a little bit on the mental performance side, because that's, I coach baseball, my son plays baseball, and that's one of the places where mental performance and having the right mindset is so critical.
I've played baseball for years with the wrong mindset. As you know, we've talked about this.
Well, and it's got to be the most mentally challenging sport there is. I mean, and just, you've got, it's just a completely different sport than football or basketball or soccer, which have like a flow to them. Yeah. And you're kind of more in reaction mode where, you're up there, getting a few at bats a game. You're maybe on the mound pitching and in a tight situation, or, you get a couple chances to make a play in the field. I mean, and you've got to be able to do that.
That's right.
And if you don't, then how do you move on and still be able to keep your head in the game?
It's not just throw your glove and stomp your feet.
Correct.
That's what I did
Maybe
wrong.
I was going to say, that's why it didn't work for me.
Wow.
So, some of my initial things that I'm focusing on now is a little bit of the mental performance in that, but I really want to help individuals with this kind of mindset process, not just mental, some people, they may want to, hey, I want to achieve this goal. So let's kind of focus on the mental performance aspect of it. But I think so many people they're looking for joy, peace, and then kind of, the purpose and all these things we've talked about, and how do you get there? And so much of that is, going back to this whole idea of, awareness of feelings and thoughts and focusing on those issues. I think that the idea of identity, which we hit on a little bit, people having an identity, what is their identity? I mean, that is such a big deal in being able to achieve any goal, is do you have the right identity? And that's where I think a lot of people fail in achieving their goals, is they may set a goal, but if they don't in their mind really see themselves as being that person who can achieve that goal, most likely their brain's going to kind of work in a counterproductive way and not get them to that goal.
So let me stop you there. Unpack that for a little bit, because I want to make sure we give you a chance to explain clearly what you mean by understanding identity.
Okay.
Because I think in our gender in particular, guys get it wrong all the time in terms of defining our identity. But share your thoughts.
Can I flip it back to you?
Yeah.
So give me an example where you think we get it wrong.
Wait, who's the host here? No. So I think
nice.
I think men in particular are wrapped up in what we do. That we find our identity in the doing. And maybe for many that's professional, maybe for others it is it's a role that we play. Like, well, I'm a dad, I'm a father, I am a husband, I'm a business, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an attorney, right? Like it's defined by these things that we do. And I think as a general stereotype, men are more wired toward action in general. So we associate action with who we are and our identity, which is why you find so many guys that struggle mightily when they lose their identity.
Correct.
In terms of being let go from the job. Or in my case, when I'm 19, 20 years old and I'm hanging up my baseball spikes, I'm retiring in early in my college career, and it's like, okay, who am I? This is all I've ever known. That's not true, but at the time it was like, this is all I've ever. I'm a baseball player. Who am I without baseball? So I think that's what I mean by guys often get it wrong because we associate it with what we do or the role that we play.
Absolutely. So with identity, we can talk about what you do, and I think that I agree with you that a lot of people focus too much on what they do as being their identity instead of who you are. And I think that's I think we've talked about this question about before, like, who are you, right? And that's not dependent on what you do. And I think that when you answer that question of who you are, it should be at a level that everything that you have can be stripped away.
Yes.
And so, so I always say, like, who am I? Like, I think I talked about a little bit before is, I'm a person who inspires and encourages others to be the best version of themselves. And, just about everything can be taken away from me and that can still exist. But the other identity would be my identity, in Christ, right? So that would be the other identity too.
Sure.
Again, that stuff, you can take away everything in my life, and those identities are going to remain.
Yep.
And I think that's very important. So that's kind of like the core identity. So I think that's something that people really need to get comfortable with. But then there's also then, like I said, maybe the goal-oriented identity, right? Which may be a little bit different. But let's say, Alon, give me an example of maybe a goal you want to achieve.
I want to travel abroad in Europe in about 10 years.
Okay. Now, that we can use that. I was thinking a little bit more kind of in a performance-related goal. Let's talk about this. But let's go.
Right.
But let's go with this. But let's go with it. But we can still go with this. Okay. But listen, if you can say that, and it can be like basically this wish or desire, or you can get it in your head and really believe and see yourself doing that. And I think that if you see yourself doing that and you continually make pictures in your head and images in your head of you doing that, you're going to do that. Because what's going to happen is that's going to activate things in your subconscious mind, and you're going to naturally do things and pursue things and become aware of things that you need to do to get you to travel abroad at that time. Does that make sense?
Okay.
But if you don't really believe that and it's just kind of thrown out there as like a wish, it's probably not going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
And I think that's, you could use this on, a lot of people use this like with like weight loss, right?
Yep.
Or fitness. And like, well, I want to lose 20 pounds. But unless you really see yourself in your mind as that fit person, you're probably not going to achieve that goal. Okay? Because it's got to be something ingrained in you, so you just do it. It doesn't even become a question of, oh, I need to work out today. It's just part of who you are now, right? It's part of that identity. And that's something I really learned again from David Goggins, who's an ultra marathon runner, is somebody asked him, like, he runs these marathons, 135 miles or more or whatever, and they asked him, you really must like to run. He's like, no, it's just like, but it's become what he does now. And it's so much part of his identity that he just goes and trains and it doesn't faze him, right? It's just because he's defined, he's kind of created that identity of who he is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that helped with his, some of the things he went through with his Navy SEAL training, with his Army Ranger training, probably gave him that the skill set and the mind to be able to create those kind of images in his mind to be able to do those things, because he knows now whatever I decide to do, I can do, right? Because he's accomplished things physically and mentally that are beyond what
mere mortals.
Yes, mere mortals can do, right? So I think that, but that really impressed upon me this whole idea of identity, how important it is when you want to achieve goals.
A few weeks ago, you texted me a phrase that just it stuck with me for a while, and I told you I woke up one morning just still kind of haunted by the phrase, but it's standards over feelings. Choosing to live this way, however, is aligned with who you are, choosing to live that way, regardless of whether I feel like it today or not.
Yeah.
And again, it's not like ignoring feelings, but choosing to move past those feelings because I've chosen these standards. And these standards are important to me, and therefore I live by them just because it's who I am. It's my
identity,
small I identity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I can't claim credit for that. It came from, I believe, Ben Newman, who's a mental performance or peak performance coach for the Alabama football team. But when he said that, like, that really just resonated with me. I'm like, this is it. This is that mentality that really sets you apart, is when you can, it's kind of that, when people talk about discipline, discipline is doing the things that you need to do even when you don't want to, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But if it becomes such a part of your identity and those standards become such a part of your identity, it's almost like you don't have to think about it, And even this morning, like, I did my normal cardio workout. I just did it, It wasn't like really, I didn't really have to think too much about it. It wasn't, I need to do this. I'm like, okay, this is what I do.
Yeah.
What you do. I'm just thinking in my head, like, I honestly believe one of the greatest gifts of God's given us is choice. Like, the ability to choose. He values that. Man, we were sitting somewhere. Actually, I was sitting somewhere with a friend and a couple of friends, and someone said that, like, like God values choice, like a lot. He gives us the freedom to make choices. And so, like, making the choices is big, and we should be adamant about making choices that, like, better ourselves, like, in life. And so hearing this, like, the choice of standard over feeling, like, you have a choice, like, no one else does for you, but you do, and you could choose to live out, like, what makes you a better person, or you could choose to jump into your feeling. And
I love that.
You know what I mean?
That's great.
Like that's pretty sweet. I'm like, well, how does this play out, like, in real life? And I'm thinking, well, one of my standards is that I want to honor people. And there's so many times during the day where I can choose to allow a feeling to stop me from honoring someone, even when I really think they deserve dishonor. Mm-hmm. When I feel, what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Like so many times, man, I am, like, the worst, I feel, when it comes to driving and someone cuts me off, especially before 10 a.m. in the morning, like rush hour traffic and whatnot. Like, some guy cut me off the other day, and I'm going to tell you, I did not honor him. I did not honor him. I made a choice to go for, like, feelings over my standards, but that's a big deal. And when I think about men, especially in the area of success, like, like, I am going to step over someone or step on somebody to get up the ladder, like, in life. That's like a normal trait of being a man. At least that's what's portrayed that I see in media and such. And, to say, you know what, I'm going to honor this person. I'm not going to step over them. I'm not going to, like, step on them. I'm not going to lie about them. I'm not going to cheat on them. I'm going to honor them by loving them. Is a hard choice to make. But when you make that first step, and then you make a second step, like my pastor, Rich Nathan, says that. He says, the Christian life is left foot, right foot. In other words, it's one foot after the other. And so in this case, when you make one step to choose standard one day, and then you choose a standard the next day and choose a standard the next day, you can look back, like, 100 days later and see that you've traveled hundreds of miles. And, that's how this gets ingrained in you. That's how you build this. That's how you, like, become this person who continues to choose, like, I'm going to choose my inner core values to live out because this is who I am every day. That's powerful to me. I love that.
That's good stuff.
So, this, Craig, our listener is primarily the dad out there that's in the mix and wants to be a better dad, wants to show up better, be a better husband, be a better leader at home, all those different roles that we play as men. And I'm wondering in this vein of the joyful mindset and standards over feelings, like, what would you say to that dad out there that's listening, that's like, how do I do this? Or how does it really apply to me in the home? I kind of get it in sports and the elite performance, and I kind of get it in the boardroom or out trying to close the deal, but tell me how it affects how I show up at home too.
Yeah.
Sure. And I want to lay a little foundation, though, just so that this will help capture maybe how people have to go about this, is that, this is all about our mindset and mental performance and how we're showing up, as you mentioned. The one thing I think what people fail to do is treat their mindset and their mental performance, if you will, and what I'd even call in their mental health, maybe in a broader picture, like their physical health. So, for example, you're not going to go to the gym once a month and think you're good, right? If you want to get in great shape.
Well, maybe that's what's wrong in my life.
That's what I'm doing.
and so a lot of this becomes looking at it from that perspective, that you need to reinforce these concepts, and really goes to what you just said about those steps every day, kind of right there. And so I like to think number one, you've got to establish some routines that are getting you started. Okay. And so, I know that for me, the routines have started with, how do I start my day first off and foremost? And that's reading the Bible and devotionals and getting my mind right from that perspective. I end with a Stoic devotional, but having that concept so my mind is in the right place. And so and you do that day in and day out to get yourself in that right mindset. Mm-hmm. The second thing then is, making sure that you're feeding your mind with the right things, whether it's books, podcasts, your sermons, things, or whatever it is that you need to do to continually maintain that mental mindset that you're trying to develop there. And again, so that's kind of where I would maybe start with people is like, okay, if you don't have routines, and this is where I started with one guy that I'd spoken with, and he was just kind of getting up, in reaction mode, right? I think a lot of people, they get up in the morning, they're in reaction mode, they're getting their kids off to school, and then going to work, and they're already kind of in a frazzled state, and their mind is never at the right. You're never really kind of in that mindset where you need to be. So for me, it had to start with getting up earlier, and I got to get up, pretty much an hour before my kids and wife get up to be able to do all these things, and like I said, get my mind right, if you will, and that includes journaling and all these things that we just talked about, so that I'm starting my day with the right perspective, if that helps. Yeah. And I think that's tremendous, and I know that because that's what I see with a lot of people is they're just in reaction mode from the point they get up, and you've got to. That's the first thing that, if I can offer, a bit of advice there. Make sure that you're addressing that you don't have to get up at 3, but you've got to get up at some point before.
Thank God.
He would have just checked out.
Yeah. But I know there's some motivational speakers. I think Eric Thomas is like always getting up at 3 o'clock or whatever. But you have to get up in time to get yourself in the right frame of mind.
What I hear in that, in sort of zoom out, what I hear is there's a choice. It's making the choice to do things that will set you up to be more quote unquote successful, or to accomplish what you want to accomplish rather than just reacting. Whether that's choosing a podcast over a movie, choosing a walk over a dessert, or instead of just the dessert, then you go for a walk. But it's that element of choice. Back to what you were saying earlier, Lon. Mm-hmm. We have the choice. It's just, are we exercising that choice to move us in a direction that's beneficial and that we want to go?
Well, and on that note, if I could kind of go back a little bit to your success podcast, which I thought was great, and really you guys were wrestling with this idea, what is success?
Right.
And, I think I talked a little bit about it, about, for me, it's striving to be the best version of myself and what God has called me to be. But I use the word striving because I'm always going to be trying to reach that point. It's always it's something in the distance that I'm always trying to attain. If I say that I'm being the best version of myself right now, then that means I have no growth. And it doesn't give me any grace for the failures and the things and the mistakes I'm going to make. Right.
Yep.
Good point.
But I like to use this concept. I call it the 3 S's, and the word success has 3 S's in it. And I like to think about being a servant. So the first S is servant, being a servant to God, family, and others, being a steward of my time and resources, and then being a speaker of truth and my faith. Mm-hmm. And, with what you just said, to me, it really hits on the steward part of it. When you really think of steward, and so much time so often when we talk about stewardship, we're always talking about finances, right?
Yeah.
But if you really think about your time,
that's really the most valuable thing you've got,
it becomes a really powerful concept. So you have those choices of like, am I going to go watch this movie on Netflix, which is dulling me and really has no redeemable value to it? Or, I could go down and, get on my treadmill or something, or I spend time with my kids or read a book or something like that.
Right.
Your choices become a little bit different when you think about stewardship of your time.
Mm-hmm. We talk a lot on the show about setting the bar higher. And we may not always reach the bar, even though we're talking about it, but we're always setting the bar higher, the mark higher than where the world sets it, or culture sets it, or the just make me comfortable, or entertain me, or give me space to numb out and check out. Like the things that you're talking about, the things that we talk about here, they're harder. They take more courage and more bravery, but in the end, they're way more worth it.
Yeah.
And you get closer to reaching your fullest potential when you're striving in that direction, rather than just back on your rear end or on your heels in reaction mode, or just in comfort mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And that's not to say that, things that we enjoy doing don't have their place.
Correct.
Sure.
I enjoy a good movie, man. I'm going to be honest with you. All you guys out there and gals out there that had parts in making the Avengers movies and whatnot, props to you. Like, I enjoy watching movies, but I think what you're saying is when it just takes over, where you blink and it's like 3 hours later and you're like into the 12th episode, of whatever, and it's like you could have been doing something else to build you, or to love someone, or to serve somebody, or to increase your knowledge of who you are, and that's the difference to me.
Yeah, because I think there's a place for the relaxation and recharging, and so I get that. I think it's to your point. I think it's where certain activities become to the point they're almost like self-medicating.
Yeah.
Or you're dulling yourself, whatever.
You're dissociating. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. I like that. Servant, steward, and speaker of truth. That's good.
It's cool.
Yeah. Dude, this has been a fantastic conversation. Appreciate you sharing your insight, your wisdom, your story, being vulnerable with us, and coming on here and giving us some stuff to really chew on. You've brought it in a way that Alana and I couldn't, and yet it's so cool to see how things align, right? Maybe saying something different, but in the end, it's kind of the same thing or thought, or introducing new thoughts.
Yeah. Definitely.
So thank you for being a part of the show. Listeners, you know this, we like to provide a way for you to reach out to Craig. If you're interested, you can follow him on Twitter at Craig Fullen is his handle. Fullen is how you spell the last name. Quality guy. I've got the pleasure of gotten to know you over the last year and change, and just really appreciate the energy and the wisdom and the reality, right? It's not just stuff you're making up. You've lived this, and you're better off for it. So I appreciate you being on the show.
Pleasure is all mine.
Listeners, what are you taking away from today? You hear me ask this question frequently, but so what? You just gave us an hour of your time to listen to Craig's story and hear some of the conversation. So what? What are you going to do about it? How can you take what you've heard and turn it into positive movement, forward growth in your own life and in the various roles that you play, whether that's at home or out in the workplace? What are you going to do? Think about that and challenge yourself to implement even just one of the things that has been talked about here, so that this isn't just information that you've consumed, but it leads to your growth and your transformation. All right. Well, with that, let's bring it to a close as we always do. Listeners, until next time.
Adios.
Adios. To send us your comments or questions, you can email us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. The theme music is by Jacob Stanifer at Jacob Stanifer Music, and this show is part of the NRT Podcast Network.